Ghost Train, posted by you/the Drowned Hounds. I was 22 years old and just moved in with my cousin. We had a band, so of course we tried to party hard. That being said, we always had a house full of bandmates hanging out. One spring night we were done practicing and chilling in the living room. I was sitting on the couch across from my cousin who was passed out in his recliner. All of a sudden he springs up from his recliner, looks at me and says, "We've got to go to the train trestle now." The train trestle was old, abandoned, torn up, railroad tracks that led to a wooden, still intact, wooden bridge over the river. We grew up in a small South Carolina town and there wasn't much to do, so we would go hang out at places like that to drink and hang out. Back to that night. When my cousin sprang up and said we've got to go to the trestle now, I thought maybe he was joking or really baked. But he kept saying it and was dead serious. The trestle was 30 minutes away and it had to be after midnight. But this was so crazy that I had to go. So we start heading out the door and all our friends outside smoking asked where the hell we were going? I told them what my cousin said and they couldn't pass it up either. So around 6 of us piled in my cousin's '93 red Ford Bronco and headed out. The 30-minute ride to the trestle was completely silent except for a few drunken "what the hell are we doings?" My cousin kept saying, "I don't know, I just feel like we got to go." We turned down the gravel road that leads to the abandoned train trestle. Follow it up for like a half a mile, make a left turn and we are looking at the trestle about at our 11 o'clock vantage point. We all get out of the Bronco and walk towards the bridge. We don't even make it 10 steps when a faint light appears in the distance and it keeps getting brighter. The light keeps coming and now is crossing the bridge. I remember one of my friends fearfully asking what the hell is going on? The light keeps getting brighter and brighter, and then I finally comprehend what I'm seeing. It's a train. The train was bright white/gray, completely silent and passing from our right to left within 20 yards. Then out of nowhere the train slows to a stop. At this point I'm in such disbelief that all I can do is stare. I know I sound crazy, but I swear the next thing that happens is people start walking off of the train. They are wearing what appeared to my 20-year-old brain to be old clothing. I remember top hats on the men who were grabbing the bags and women in big dresses departing the cars. Next, it gets a little fuzzy because it's been 17 years but the people just vanished and the completely silent train starts moving again and slowly disappears to our left. After the train disappeared, we were in complete shock. And the reality sets in. We start freaking out and trying to figure out what the hell just happened. I can't remember who yelled it but someone screamed, "Let's get the fuck out of here." We all bolted to the Bronco and tore out of there. 17 years later and I remember it like it was yesterday. Woman on trail in the dead of night, posted by you/Bill Blanco. I was about 18 years old when this took place, so only be a couple of years ago. One of my best friends, let's call him Nick, used to live a couple towns over. It was the summer right after we graduated and we used to hang out all the time. So there was a solid month or two where I would go to his neighborhood and we would smoke for hours on end in my car. His neighborhood was a very quaint suburb area with lots of old people living there. We had a couple spots we would regularly park for our sessions and sometimes we would use this somewhat popular forest trail at the front of his neighborhood. You would see lots of people running, walking, or biking through there throughout the day. One evening we decided that we would smoke on this trail. This wasn't out of the ordinary for us at this point. We walked maybe a mile and a half into this trail and casually chatted and joked around as friends do. Eventually we found a bench where we sat down and started smoking and talking about our days and topics of our interest. We saw a middle-aged gentleman briefly jog by us as we sat on the bench. That was the only person we saw during our walk through the trail. By the time we finished smoking the sun has already went down and it was getting dark, so we mentioned going back to the car to keep rolling up and continuing our session. We started walking back the way we came from. Nick and I were talking about whatever. I can't remember what we were talking about since it was casual and we have already gotten into the routine of just shooting the shit all the time. Eventually as we continued walking it became eerily darker. So dark I couldn't see much and I was trying to allow my eyes to adjust to the dark. I got to a point where my eyes were adjusted to it so the trail had a more bluish hint to it instead of a pitch black, kind of like how horror movies try portraying the night, although the forest line around us in the distance was still so dark you couldn't see into it. As Nick and I were making our way through the trail we got to a point where the trail was straight with a bend at the end of it cutting off out of our vision from the rest of the path. Couldn't have been any farther than 150 to 200 feet where the cutoff seemed to be. Nick was on my right side as we were chatting, shoulder to shoulder walking at the same pace. As we were walking a small beam of white light seemed to be cutting through the dark shroud of trees off ahead of us slightly to the left off the trail, still in front of us but not on the pathway. In my head without any concern of the light I assumed it was moonlight reflecting off the riverbank to the right of us, but as we continued walking towards it, I noticed that the beam of light was moving as well. I was talking at this moment, and as my eyes began locking onto this figure, my words slowly started to drift away into a dead silence. To my surprise, Nick was also locked onto this weird light figure. Our pace slowed down as we were quietly watching this figure emerging from the forest. It was a whitish-gray figure that seemed unfazed by the ground as it was moving in our direction in the distance. Nick eventually broke our silence and asked me, "Do you see that?" He knew I was looking at it as well. Neither Nick or I are religious or believe in spirits, and my brain started to try to come up with the most logical answer, so I quickly replied, "I think it's just moonlight," to which he responds, "I don't think so." Now the figure was maybe 60 feet away, and we could tell it was a human shape. It had legs, it had shoulders that moved in the pace of its stride, although not seeming to be fazed by the pitch-black ground beneath it. I started to get scared. It looked like a woman in a white dress walking towards us with white legs, arms, and head, although no hair I could see. Knowing all too well what that means in horror movies, my mind began racing for a more rational conclusion. I thought to myself, well, maybe it's a man in a white coat walking on the trail, but that only left me with the question as to why a man would be walking into the trail this late at night. My heart began pounding as this woman with a white glow started coming closer and closer. I tried so hard to make a face out in the night, but I could only see the distinct white figure of her. She had the glow of the moon. Everything from head to toe was all white. Nick and I at this point halted in our tracks at the same time, locking onto this glowing woman who was walking directly into our path. We could tell that if she were to continue walking towards us, she would have to walk through us. She was dead center on the path, continuously walking closer and closer. At this point I was so terrified, and completely suspended in disbelief. Besides the odd occasion of a door shutting at random in my house, I have never seen what seemed to be a spirit. So clearly I could see this woman in a dress. Although I was scared out of my mind, an overwhelming sense of tranquility was coming over me, like I had nothing to be afraid of. The woman became so close she couldn't have been more than 20, maybe 30 feet in front of us at this moment. So close you could guess her height, which was tall enough to be somewhat eye level with her, yet no eyes or distinct facial feature besides possibly the shape of a nose. I can't begin to express how clear and close the woman got to us. Dead in our tracks, eyes locked on her, we sat there silently watching her getting ready to walk in between us. Without any thought to it, simultaneously Nick and I locked eyes with each other. The look of horror and confusion in his eyes reassured me he was seeing the same thing as me, as he quickly blurted, "Dude, what is that?" We quickly shot our eyes back in front of us, and before we could even prepare for her, she was gone. Completely vanished, as if there wasn't an all-white glowing woman walking no farther than 20 feet ahead of us. We began speed walking in silence. Neither of us wanted to seem scared at first. So much was running through my mind just trying to comprehend what just happened. Eventually I spoke up. All I said was, "Let's go," and we both started running as fast as we could without one of us getting ahead of the other. I lost track of how far in we were at that point, but it was definitely more than half a mile in, but as fast as we ran it seemed we were at the end of the trail within seconds. This whole ordeal was probably around only a minute long, but from the sheer horror it felt like time came to stand still. We quickly got into my car parked near the trail entrance, and I hightailed it back to his house. Nick began saying, "Bro, what just happened? We both saw that, right?" And we began confirming with each other everything we just witnessed. We asked, "What did we see? Why did we see her? Why did she show herself to us? What does this mean?" My understanding of reality was completely altered. It felt like such a dystopian reality when it occurred, like we stumbled into a limbo of some sort. To this day I have no idea what else it could have been. It was so real, and the area became so unnatural when this happened. What creeps me out the most and comforts my sanity is that we both saw it. We both saw a woman in a dress glowing white walking towards us with an unfazed, uninterrupted stride, like it wasn't actually walking on the ground. We didn't hear footsteps or anything. I suggested that due to there being a lot of old folks who live in that area, that it was the spirit of someone who once lived there and possibly enjoyed the trail in their youth. I have also heard that the area was a popular grounds during the Civil War. Nick and I reminisce occasionally about our experience and have even attempted going back with the intentions of seeing her again. However, when we did, I was overwhelmed with a gut feeling to turn back around before we saw something we really didn't want to see again. Since then I've been more open to the idea of spirits and still can't really wrap my head around what we saw. We tell this story to our friends and loved ones, but when we do, it doesn't have the same surrealness to it. They usually laugh it off as yet another wild story rather than a truly reality warping experience. I wonder if anyone else has similar stories or experiences. Thank you for reading. I'd be interested to hear feedback on your stories as well. Dr. 2 high school boys went to smoke on a forest trail and encounter the spirit of an all-white woman in a dress.
Thanks for watching. Please do like, share, comment and subscribe for more videos.